Thank you for feeding my ego. Who's ready for another panel? Y'all are more ready for the bar. I appreciate the drinking, though. All right, this next one is needed policy. What will the midterms bring? I can tell you what I hope they bring. So our moderator is... this guy also belongs on the Mount Rushmore of the golden age of YouTube. He has over 300 million views. He is a multi-hyphenate, musician, comedian, satirist. Give a warm welcome to the iconic Rucka Ali. He is a juggernaut of a YouTuber covering all the crimes and crazies. He also produces the Stop K-12 Indoctrination video series for the David Horowitz Freedom Center. In his debates, he has beaten more people than Amber Heard. On a personal note, he is one of the best damn people I know. Welcome, the actual justice warrior, Sean Fitzgerald. Ugh. She is a public policy and communications professional who advises committed conservatives in Congress. You've seen her on Timcast and Slightly Offensive. Put your hands together for the flawless Lisa Reynolds. He is a philosophy professor at Georgia State University. You've seen him on Joe Rogan, Reason TV, The Majority Report, and he's the host of Give Them an Argument. Welcome, Ben Burgis! This next guy, he is the chief mansplainer and senior political analyst of Don't Walk, Run Productions. With over 500,000 subscribers, he destroys everyone with facts and logic. Please welcome Andrew. Don't walk, run, 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 Andrew, run.
All right. Hey, everybody, how we doing? Yeah. All right, so I was thinking we could start this off a little bit different than usual. So I've got a list of topics that were suggested for for us to talk about. Why don't I read this list of topics, and each one of you, one by one, could say which one of these you think is going to be the most important to voters, or you could add one that wasn't on the list, all right? Here we go. Build back better. What should have happened? Where do we go from here? Social media censorship. Antitrust laws. Transparency education. What do you want to see? Quote, don't say gay, or quote, anti-grooming bills. Do you agree with the DeSantis bill? How would you alter it? Are term limits effective? Election integrity, voter ID or HR 1. What is your policy position or favored policy? What immigration reform would you advocate for? Can any policies help ease inflation? Can Congress do anything? Prescription pills, how can Congress intervene? Student debt relief, is this a regressive tax or something needed? How did Congress do with spending since 2020? What parts made sense, what failed? All right, one by one. I guess we can start with the far right, ladies first.
The far right, no pun intended.
Hey. So, yeah, what do you think is going to matter to voters?
There's so much there. Right now, I think that, especially on the right, the parents are really motivated. Parents don't like what's going on with CRT. They don't like what's going on with the indoctrination of their children. And that's been going on since like the 1960s. And they're finally like seeing the results, especially after COVID, when they were home and got to see what parents, what teachers were teaching their kids. I think that's important. I think the border's going to be big. I don't know. There's a bunch of things in there that are, inflation's huge. People are feeling all of Biden's regressive policies in their wallets right now, and so we're in for a really interesting 2022 election season.
Education, what's being taught. Andrew, what do you think?
I would add to that. Definitely education. With the governor's races, there's going to be 36 governors up for election, re-election. And CRT and education and mask mandates, and it's just going to be down the line. You're going to see a lot of I think you're going to see probably like 3 or 4 states flipped from blue to red. Michigan,
Hopefully.
Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nevada. I think that those are all in play after what happened in Virginia. Virginia was a wake-up call, and the Democrats are not heeding that call. They're doubling down, and that's a big mistake. You're not going to see a red wave or a red tsunami. It's going to be like a fucking red earthquake. That's my.
Sean?
Yeah.
I mean, education is important. Obviously, the Virginia race did kind of hinge on that specific issue. But I would say the one not mentioned is crime. Like in New York City, Eric Adams won the Democratic primary because he was the most tough on crime candidate in New York City. Now, whether or not that panned out when he actually became mayor is something we can discuss later. But crime on the local level is shifting positions and opinions. And the number one voting group that seems to be shifting based on crime is Latinos. So everybody's talking about how all of a sudden Latino Americans are going from solid Democratic voters to kind of acting more like Italians or other Catholic immigrants in the past. So crime is the issue that I would want to get into.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, because the Biden administration and the Democratic leadership has been so tepid and uninspiring, I think that it's entirely possible that you will get an election based on contrived culture war nonsense about education and masks and the rest of that. But certainly stuff I would want to get into.
Culture war nonsense?
Oh,
you
yes.
want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, yes. Whereas the stuff that I would want to get into, you mentioned some of what's in Build Back Better. I would also mention, healthcare, which the 2020 election was about to a great extent and has been completely dropped, and is certainly an example of something where, if the election's about that, the opinions of voters on that are, to the left of Biden, never mind the Republicans.
So sounds like the culture war stuff, the social issues, and like what kids are being taught, CRT and more, is on the minds of a lot of voters. Is that what you're calling culture war nonsense, or can you expand on that?
Sure. So I think that a lot of that stuff, is contrived in the sense that some of these are really solutions in search of problems. And that there are things that, Republicans would like to change the subject to for obvious reasons because...
Wait, why do I feel like you're saying a bunch of nothing? What do you actually mean that it's contrived?
I guess you feel like it because you're not listening or you just jump to that conclusion or something like that.
What is contrived? Are you saying that people aren't talking to kids in kindergarten through 3rd grade and asking them or talking to them about what gender is and what their sexuality should be and talking about masturbation? Are you saying that that's not happening?
Well,
we've seen evidence.
Well, talking about masturbation would actually not be affected in any way by.
But that did happen recently, correct?
By the DeSantis bill. There's nothing in that language that's about talking about sexually explicit content or not talking about it. What is in there is about talking about sexual orientation or gender identity, which is a very different set of topics.
Do you think that should be talked about from
to 3rd graders?
And I think that the language, of course, is hopelessly vague. So I think that there are very legitimate concerns about having a chilling effect on just, people, doing, if you want to talk about masturbation, nothing in the bill would stop you. If you want to read a book that has a gay character in it to students, that could potentially stop you. The language is consistent with that. In fact, especially if you look at what's already on the books in Florida, that there is, that it already says that, sex ed in Florida, it explicitly says, it's in the statutes, look at what PEN America has put out about this, that sex ed has to promote abstinence outside of marriage, and it has to promote the benefits of monogamous heterosexual marriage. That's already in state law. So I think the idea that, I think that in many ways, again, I think it's a solution in terms of a problem. I think it's an attempt to whip up a moral panic so that people will think about that instead of thinking about out-of-control levels of economic inequality, instead of thinking about a healthcare system that most people hate for very good reasons, instead of thinking about labor unions that most Americans are supportive of and the Republicans are absolutely not, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I mean when I say contrived.
So, but if these things are all nonsense, then why is the left fighting so hard against it? Why are they pushing back? Why can't you just go, yeah, it's no big deal. Why would we teach third graders sex ed and gender identity? Kindergarten. Right?
The law is kindergarten
Don't
through
say
third grade.
gay.
Law
Right?
has
If
nothing
it's a
to
bunch
do
of
with
nonsense,
sex ed.
why are they pushing back so hard?
Yeah, law has nothing to do with sex ed, so that's just a basic correction. As far as pushing back so hard, yeah, I think that the issue, the alleged problem that something is supposed to be a solution to, could be contrived nonsense, and it could still be the case that the proposed solution actually does do real harm in the real world. That they have as with the anti-CRT bills, if you have state bureaucrats looking over the shoulders of classroom teachers, and you have this chilling effect where people are worried, oh, if I say the wrong thing about the wrong subject at the wrong time and the wrong person hears it, then they could lose their job. I think that is an extremely unhelpful intervention in classroom. Now, as far as why Democrats are pushing back against it the way that they do, I actually agree that it is a huge strategic blunder that they're allowing the discussion to be so much about this, right? I think that in that Virginia election that was mentioned earlier, ideally, McAuliffe would have said, why are you talking, about the schools so much? Why aren't you running for school board if you want to do that?
Because kids were getting
why don't we
raped
talk
in
about
bathrooms.
wages? Why don't we talk about unions? Why don't we talk about health care? McAuliffe couldn't do that because he had nothing attractive to say about any of that because he's a mediocre centrist.
But you're kind of rewriting that election because he did try dismissing the parents and all the people that were concerned about this. He did try downplaying the issue. It turns out that
Not
parents
really.
are concerned about what's going on in their kids. And
It's not really
he
what
went
he
even
did, though.
further, and he started attacking the parents as potential racists. It's a
Yeah,
horrible strategy.
that would be the opposite of downplaying. That would
Well,
would
that-
actually be leading into focusing on the issue and just trying to appeal hard to the other side of the issue. That's a very different thing from downplaying it and saying, let's not talk about that.
Well, it's a strategy.
Let's talk about
It's-
economic
it's a
equality,
strategy,
which of course
though.
McAuliffe couldn't do.
You downplay-
It's a strategy. It's not downplaying strategy.
No. You downplay, and then if that doesn't work, you start attacking. So he was going through the motions.
Okay,
I will agree, it's not a very,
Well,
it's not a very
Wait, I
solid
just have a question.
campaign
If
strategy.
there was downplaying, it didn't last for very long.
Are you saying that parents, that children that go to their guidance counselors in school and they're telling them that they're having problems and their guidance counselor's talking to them about how they're transgender and all that stuff, and the counselors are hiding it from the kids, so much so that the kids are now this one girl did 2 suicide attempts in school, and they didn't even tell the parents till the second one. You think that's okay to be happening in schools? Do you think it's okay to be reading books like they have in Fairfax, where it's talking about older men with kids that are under, 6th grade about fellatio? You think that that's okay to be in our school system? Because that is the real problem, that it's ubiquitous and people are denying that it's happening, but we have multiple examples of it happening over and over again. And for you to say that we're downplaying the issue or it's not an issue is like an affront to parents. This is not what we're supposed to be teaching in school. This is if anything, it's what Mark said. It's the destruction of the family through race and gender, which was verbatim.
Mark said that?
Yeah, it's
Destruction
actually-
of the family through race and gender?
Yes, 100%.
Mark said that? Where does Mark say that?
Verbatim in the Communist Manifesto.
No, he does not.
Yes, he does. He goes, the destruction of the bourgeoisie family, the destruction of capitalism is through the bourgeoisie family. It says that, an
Everybody's
actual
looking
quote.
it up on their
Okay.
phone.
Go look it up on your
Okay.
phones right now and tell me I'm not
here's
wrong.
what you should look it up on your phones. Here's what Mark
I'll do it
said.
for you.
Here's what Marx actually says in the Communist Manifesto about that. Here's what she's thinking
tell
of. Marx says, communists are accused of wanting to destroy the family, but actually it's capitalism that's already destroyed the family. That's what Marx says in the Communist Manifesto. Marx does not have some sort of, we're going to do some secret plan to destroy the family through something about race and gender.
Yes, they do,
That is, I think, to put it nicely, a little anachronistic.
Do you agree that he doesn't bring up race and gender in the Communist Manifesto, though? Sounds like
He absolutely does bring
He
up
does?
race
He
and gender.
brings up
And here,
race
look,
and
look,
gender in the
it's
Communist
right here.
Manifesto?
Marx, Engels, and the abolition of the family. It's everywhere, guys. Pay attention.
no, the abolition of the family maybe, but not
Through
race and gender.
He says through other institutions like race and gender, which motivate people.
There's nothing about race or gender in the Communist
there is.
Manifesto. Trust me on this.
Okay. Now this seems like more like you two are arguing about the issue, but do you agree that this is going to be important to voters? Are a lot of parents or people concerned with the next generation of students, are they going to be voting based on this issue? And would you say most of them are conservative on this? Would you say that most voters feel more on Lisa's side, or how do you gauge the sense of the culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of voters, and I mean, I'm not particularly interested in sort of saying like, oh, here's like exactly what the poll breakdown is. I actually think that's the least interesting sort of discussion to have. You could just kind of Google that. But I think that but look, my sense is that there are voters who have a variety of concerns depending on what the election ends up being about. They could be pulled in different directions. And I don't think that there's anything like unanimity among parents of school-age children on this stuff. But yeah, I think that sure, there is a chunk of parents and there's a chunk of non-parents who could be pulled to vote for Republicans over this if the election is about what, yes, I'm sorry, I do think is a bit of a contrived moral panic where you could find real examples, but I think is blown vastly out of proportion, in terms of prevalence in the school system.
Yeah, Sean, what do you think? You've been kind of quiet.
I think, as far as where the American people are lined up, like parents become more conservative overall. So like even if they're like genuinely progressive or more left-leaning, when it comes to their children, that's always going to be a shock issue. And the reason the Republicans are harping on this issue is because there's no real good defense from the left. They have like not concocted their rebuttal. So I think if the Republicans make this the issue, they will have even better gains than if they don't. Because right now there's not a good rebuttal. And even I know you want to talk about policy, and I feel you on that because we all work in the political space and we're interested in that. But most people vote emotionally. So when you say, listen, I want to talk about like this specific economic issue, that's not what people actually vote on. And we've seen that time and time again when they go to the polls. Well, they're not thinking about, unionization policy. Well,
certainly there have been many, many elections where people are thinking about unions when they go to the polls. Historically, I agree that for a variety of reasons, that's very unlikely to be the case in 2022.
And usually economic voters vote when the economy's bad, I throw out this party. It's never more than that level of superficial.
So let's bring it back to economics and policy.
It is a little bit more, right? I think that you certainly find areas of the country where unionization had a lot to do with voting patterns over the course of decades, right? And I think if you're right, of course, right, that it's going to be an emotional thing, it's going to be a visceral thing, and so if you're going to get people excited to vote for you for the sake of efforts to materially help people and create a more equal society, you've got to be pushing stuff that's big and ambitious. It's going to get people excited and inspired on that kind of emotional, visceral level. I mean, if you're going to say Biden and the Democratic leadership certainly haven't done that, so there's really no way, unfortunately, that the 2022 election's going to end up being about that, then unfortunately I agree.
But everything they are doing that's in that vein is hurting Americans in their pockets. So if we want to talk about, if you want to change it to actual policy, we can go economic policy, energy independence, and how we've totally depleted in less than in a year and a half our energy independence. And we can talk about how inflation and ridiculous excessive spending is the cause of this inflation. So let's go into policy. Let's go into, if you want to get to this everybody equal kind of utopia that you want to live in, how is it Biden implementing those policies is hurting Americans in their pocket, and that's going to be another driver for the election season too. I mean, people are looking at their own gas prices.
Which of those do you think Biden has implemented? Because last I checked, even the $15 minimum wage didn't happen, which was absurdly.
We're talking about the not drilling on federal lands, the Keystone Pipeline canceling, the Nord Stream sanctioning that one, being more energy dependent on Russia and.
So now you're talking about environmental policies, and that's fine to talk about, but that's a very different thing from what we were just talking about in terms of.
We were talking about economic policy.
It's not really about the environment,
an economically egalitarian, policy to make the society more economically egalitarian. Biden has done exactly nothing. I mean, even the $15 minimum wage was nixed on the grounds that, sorry, the Senate parliamentarian, a staffer who issues non-binding recommendations we could fire at any time, said we couldn't. That shows what the level of commitment to that is, which is nothing.
Well, he's not even sentient, so like, let's not act like he's the one that's, in charge of anything. It's all staffers anyway. But
I mean, they've made, Biden made so many promises down the line through the campaign. Oh, we're going to cancel $10,000 in student debt. What happened to that? Oh, we're going to give everybody, if Georgia, if John Ossoff and Warnock, if they win their race, we're going to give everybody a $2,000 check. And they were like, oh, not really $2,000. Remember that? It was just like a $1,200 check.
Actually, it was Trump, to correct you, it was Trump pushing the $2,000 checks, which I actually came out against too.
But they jumped on it, and that was the selling point.
But Ossoff and Warnock certainly ran on it, And,
Warnock's gone.
And all of the Democrats
Warnock is not
got
going to win
behind it
his
during the
election.
special elections. And they didn't do it, which I agree. Biden sucks. He should have done those things.
I mean, the defense for the 1,400, oh my God, I'm defending Joe Biden a little bit, is that he said that they give him 6 and then he gave him 14, which was not the promise.
No, Warnock had on his Instagram, it said, see this $2,000 check? It could be yours if you vote for me. I mean, they said 2,000. They didn't say 1,400 or whatever.
I love that politics has devolved so much where they're like, we'll bribe you with your own money. Just come out to the polls.
Look, they took every single word that Trump said literally. And then when we do it back, they're like, no, let's walk that back. That's not what they meant. Joe Biden, poor Joe Biden, he didn't mean to say that, if Russia had a chemical weapon, if they used a chemical weapon, we would respond in kind, which means we'd use chemical weapons. He didn't say that. No, he didn't say, oh, hey, this man, Putin, cannot remain in power. He didn't say that. He didn't mean that. He didn't mean it, and then he denies it. The guy's a joke.
All very solid criticisms. That's why I campaigned hard for the other guy at the primary.
But Trump, it's like, oh my God, he said Kofefi once. And oh my God, it's a headline for a week. With Trump, it's like, hey, Trump likes 2 scoops of ice cream at the White House. It's amazing. You can't believe this. He loves ice cream. And then with Joe Biden, they're like, what kind of ice cream are you eating, sir? Oh, chocolate. So
you missed the best.
It's such a double standard. Anyway, I'm getting.
You missed the best part of that, where he said that Putin couldn't remain in power, but that was his personal opinion. It wasn't the position of the presidency. They pulled a pope.
But after he said that, CNN and MSNBC they were basically like, this is like his Reagan Berlin Wall moment, that he was calling for regime change, and then immediately the White House is like, he didn't mean that. He didn't mean that exactly.
Because it gives Putin no out, right? Like, if you want him to pull back from this, and you're going to automatically say that he's some, war criminal, and that means he's going to be tried, it doesn't give him an out to pull out. If anything, it's going to make him double down. It was like one of the worst things he could have said ever.
Yeah.
And now we're here where we are.
I mean, I agree. I have had an article in the Daily Beast last week about why the U.S. should be pushing for a negotiated solution to the conflict. Sounds like everything Andrew's been saying for the last few minutes are all the criticisms that the left has made of Biden. And so, of course, they're all ones I agree with.
But why do we care about this issue? There's 14 other conflicts going around where there's more people dying than in Ukraine right now. There's 14 other conflicts, and why do we care about this one? And this is what's more important than actually what policy and what elections are there, because what happens is that the media controls all the narratives. It controls what you care about. It controls what conflicts you care about. It controls all of that. And so it doesn't really matter who wins what election, because the thing that's driving everything in this country is like this overarching media narrative, which is clearly aligned with the left, as I'm sure you would agree with. And so what does it matter? What does it matter who's in there?
Do you agree with that? That the left runs the media?
Yeah, I think that the left runs the media to the exact extent that Marx is concerned with race and gender in the Communist Manifesto.
They are.
I think that, like, giant corporations run the media, giant corporations whose profit interests are obviously aligned with precisely the opposite of the left's agenda. Giant corporations that don't want to have to pay their employees.
Like Disney?
Yes, like Disney. Because, again, the reason you don't think so is that you think that this kind of culture war ephemera, you think that that's like the heart of it. But certainly if you think about like the platform Bernie Sanders ran on in 2016 and 2020, how much of that stuff do Disney executives want? They want to pay their workers more money. They want to make it easier for their workers to unionize. Do they want to be taxed to pay for all these expansive social programs? Of course not, right? Again, as Sean pointed out, I don't think the mic picked it up.
That might be hypocritical of
This is
them.
indeed why I work for independent left media, Jacobin Magazine, because I do not think that,
have meetings
that the
where they're
media
pushing
is run by the left. If you want to say that the corporate plutocrats who run the media have cultural politics that are more liberal than yours, I'm sure that's true, but I think that's a very different claim.
I will also say, like, I don't want to gloss over the Ukraine thing really quickly because, yes, there are conflicts that are more deadly. Yes, there are conflicts that have been ongoing more. Yes, the media portraying this one as, like, the most important conflict is odd, but, like, let's not mistake what is happening here. Russia historically invades its Western neighbors. What we're seeing is that happening. The country that they happen to invade is Ukraine. They used to be a nuclear power after the Soviet Union fell. They gave up their nuclear weapons on the promise that they would have some long-term security. And the fact that that's being broken is a dangerous precedent for the world order going forward.
I agree with that, but we also said that we would move. NATO said that they would move no further to.
No, so
yes.
no. That,
See, I don't want to be a Putin apologist up here, and I'll get in
Sean,
trouble.
after you answer the NATO expansion question, I'm really curious what you think the U.S. should do with Russia.
Sure, but first, the whole thing about expanding 1 inch eastward, it's just not the case. So if you listen to Gorbachev's interview, and I believe 2014, he explains this clearly, that what they were talking about was the unification of Germany and how the U.S. was not going to expand into Eastern Germany at the time of unification. There was nothing to talk about Poland or any of these other countries at the time because they were part of the Soviet Union. So obviously they weren't going to join NATO. They were in the Warsaw Pact. This is basic, and I'm sorry to say it, it is basic anti-American propaganda that I'm seeing all over the media. It's just not true that that promise was made. And by the way, NATO doesn't really expand in the way that you think. It's not like we say, you get in NATO, we got you. These countries asked to be in NATO. And one of the countries that asked to be in NATO immediately was Poland. One of the things that you could know Poland for, if you don't know anything else about it, is that its nickname during World War II was the Bloodlands. If you live between Germany and Russia, of course you're going to want to join an alliance that protects you from that. And the idea that the Ukrainians should be invaded by the Russians because they wanted to join
That's
an
not
alliance.
what I said, Sean.
Hold on, I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying you specifically. But the idea that the Ukrainians should be invaded by the Russians because they wanted to join an alliance designed to prevent them from being invaded by the Russians makes no sense. Like, of course you have the right to self-determination.
How much does this matter to voters, by the way?
Not really
nothing,
a lot.
actually.
No.
Ukraine, it doesn't mean anything. But,
So, yeah.
but our oil independence does, and how it's driving up prices does, and how much we're reliant on Russia and foreign nations for our oil does. And that's where the Ukraine conflict comes in.
Yeah.
But no, what does matter is our people's wallets, for sure.
Right, so
So-
people
so-
vote their wallet. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I did just want to, because I'd asked a question earlier, I did just want to hear the answer, because what Sean thinks the U.S. should be doing, it's not doing in Ukraine.
It's actually hard because I do agree that if you start seriously arming the Ukrainians with offensive capabilities, you're going to end up in a situation where that could be seen as an additional aggression, and nobody wants to have a World War III. But the problem is that if you continually allow the Russians to expand, then they're going to see that as maybe an incentive to expand more and more. So we might be squashing a fight right now that's going to be an even bigger and more vicious war in the future. So there's not really a good solution, if I'm being 100% honest. Like, I acknowledge that fully. And this is also not all on Joe Biden. This is years of history among multiple administrations. And it's also Russia's tendency to expand westward because they've been doing that for 500 years. And unless you believe in my time-traveling NATO theory, it's not all due to NATO aggression.
What do you think the best case scenario to the end of this conflict is going to be?
I don't even know. Like, honestly, maybe, like, if they get some territory and they decide to quit, but I don't think that's going to happen.
See, I think ultimately we shouldn't even be doing anything
Agreed.
with the U.S. The U.S. should not be
100%.
in this conflict at all.
Well,
Second, the solution to stop the bloodshed is just give the Donbass to Russia. it was theirs anyway. Russian separatists were there. It was basically under Russian control, right? So just give it to them, and if you can negotiate that and say, let's...
Donbass?
What's that?
All of Donbass, so like Mariupol, all of that?
I'm not
How about it's none of our business? Who cares?
Look,
How about that? Like, who gives a shit what they
If you want
have?
to stop the bloodshed, do some real negotiation instead of Zelensky saying, "Hey, we need a lot of money."
How about just
We're
let's
gonna-
do our own oil and not be reliant
No,
on them and like put America first?
Yeah,
Who cares what they're doing? I don't care.
Our energy
many
policy
points.
right now is ridiculous because we haven't had a land lease sale since Biden took office, and we had an offshore sale, and it was immediately there was like lawsuits, and the DOJ, they don't care. They're not fighting it. They're not like, no, we really need to sell this offshore property. They're just like, yeah, we're fine. Deb Haaland is just like, I don't care, right? Now the courts are forcing the Biden administration to go back and sell these land lease for oil and gas. But now they're saying, we're going to up the royalty rate. So, when you pump oil, we need a bigger percentage. They hate oil, they hate fossil fuels, but they're so into taking that extra money if the oil companies say, "Wait, we'll drill there," which it's also stifling. Some of these companies are like, we don't have to do this. It's like we're giving too much. We're paying 300 years of carbon tax. Basically, they look at what's being drilled, and then they say, how does this affect the world for 300 years? And they tax these companies that it's ridiculous. It's in the Wall Street Journal. It's an amazing piece.
I will say to go back to the Ukraine, but I will make it about oil really quickly.
Just get out of Ukraine.
I agree with you. Like the United States, it doesn't affect the day-to-day lives of every American right now. I mean, there's shocks to the oil market, which, by the way, the U.S. I do think should be pumping more oil. But the idea that a disruption in the global supply chain anywhere doesn't affect prices everywhere is just economically illiterate.
I'm not saying that.
But as for give them the Donbass, who's giving it? It's not our territory to give.
I'm not saying we give it. I'm saying this should be between the Ukraine and Russia. That's it.
But I have a memory that goes back to 2014, and I love you, Andrew, but I got to push back. I have a memory that goes back to 2014 when we were the world was like, okay, well, he took Crimea. I guess we just let him have that kind of. Here's some sanctions or whatever. I'm sure it won't happen again. How long before this problem reoccurs?
Why is it our problem? Sanctions don't work anyway. Everybody knows sanctions don't work anyway. Who cares if he takes Crimea? Who really cares? Do you care?
Yeah, remember
again,
how the sanctions were supposed to be a deterrent, and then suddenly oh no, we never said that. Sanctions never deter.
I don't want to send American
We're not the world police. It is not our problem. When are we a country? We're not even really a country anymore. Why aren't we a country anymore? Because we take all our money and decide we need to solve the world's problems. Can we reinvest that and take the money that we're giving to everybody else and pay attention to us and what's going on here and what's going on our streets and our homeless problem in California and our drug problem and our border problem? Can we just pay? Why are we sending 14 million to the Ukraine border, but we won't send 4 million to our own?
Listen,
it's insane.
I 100% agree. To hear left-wing politicians say, or Democratic politicians to say, because I know you're going to say they're not left-wing, to have them say that the border of Ukraine is sacred when they ignore our border, pretty much, is ridiculous and absurd. 100% agree. However, historically, ignoring conflicts breaking out on the European continent has not worked out as a good strategy to save American lives in the past.
Actually, it has.
And on top of that, if we're talking about Iraq or other wars in the Middle East where there's no real strategic advantage, and we're not talking about a nuclear power undermining the precedent of a country being able to disarm, then I would 100% agree with you. But the problem is that the Ukrainians made a deal, and every other country is going to think that the best way to protect themselves from being invaded is to get a nuclear weapon. And that is not in the American strategic interest for everyone to be a nuclear power. And to deny that is just not connected to reality.
Don't you understand, though, that the reason that we were so prosperous and successful after World War II is because we were the last country to really get involved, right? The less that we get involved with things, the less that we stay out of it, the better off America is in general. It's true. If we go and focus our stuff back on us and stop worrying about who cares? Who cares if Russia has all of Europe? I don't care. Who cares? I don't.
The one guy
care.
clapping.
I mean, okay, maybe. All right, but
It doesn't matter.
I mean, I see your point.
I am
but
being a
mean,
little
that's-
extremist
it's-
right now,
it's
but like
a
that's
little-
not necessarily. But my point is that like we have so many. Like if everybody would just concentrate on their own country and the things that are important to them, and like I said, we're struggling. We have our own problems. We have like this inflation is crazy. Actually, the Russian whatever it is doing ruble is doing better than our own dollar at this point.
And you mentioned the border.
You know what I mean.
Right. And that's a huge issue right now too. Like, what can we do?
Get back up.
What can we do to what can the Democrats do to fix it? Because they're not doing anything about it.
So you mentioned the border, and you said something that I have to say I can't let this go. You said that like we're treating Ukrainian the Ukrainian border is sacrosanct, but not America's. I mean, do you actually think that there's some analogy between like people just like coming over to work and live and an invading army like bombing the shit out of the country and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, everything that Russia's doing in Ukraine?
How are not hundreds of thousands of migrants, of illegal aliens? How is that not considered, even remotely considered, an invasion?
Because that's not what the word invasion means. This is. Invasion is when you have an army that comes in to try to absorb a country into another country or to change its government by force of arms. What you're talking about is just people coming in like in the hopes of getting better jobs, right? The Russians are not coming into Ukraine to like see if they can work at Ukrainian restaurants, at Russian restaurants, in Kiev, right? Russians are not coming into to Ukraine just kind of in the hopes that like they won't be noticed and they can live and work there. They're coming into Ukraine to bomb.
What about the terrorists coming
to bomb
over?
U.S. cities, to bomb
It only
Ukrainian
takes one.
cities, etc. Right?
It's been 24 since
I
January.
think that there's. I think that like whatever your views on immigration are, that just seems like that analogy is one that I'm gonna have trouble with.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. Would you say voters consider illegal immigration to be akin to a country invading us? That sounds like more like maybe a commentary, but not like how voters maybe look at it. What do you?
Yeah,
think?
how many need to come over? How many, like, what's the number that need to come over before it's like
It's
the
not a matter
equivalent of a country?
number, it's
They
just
just
not
want-
what
they just
invasion
want
jobs.
means.
To come over.
Like, I mean, it doesn't matter what the number is. The invasion doesn't mean people just peacefully coming over to live and work. Invasion
Peacefully,
means,
the cartels are peacefully taking over California?
Invasion means that there is an army that's coming in, like shooting and bombing. Which I think you'd have to agree.
So we've
is
had
not
terrorists come
primarily
over,
what,
we've had cartels coming over, we've had
Mexican or Central American immigrants
excessive
have done in the
human
United
trafficking.
States. It has nothing to do with numbers.
Now, I understand your point, and I didn't say, to be clear, that the invading Russian army is the same thing as people invading the southern border, if you want to use that like terminology. But it is a problem, and our border of the United States should be more paramount than the border between the Ukraine and the Russians. Now, there are geopolitical reasons that I think are being downplayed on why that territory matters. But I was just making fun of the comment that the Ukrainian border is sacred, or whatever the phrase that they used for it was, because it was kind of absurd from a guy who was running on open borders messaging, even if that was not what he fully intended in terms of policy.
Let me ask a question. If a lot of American voters are like fed up with Democrat policies, then what do Republicans have to do to not fuck this up?
With time, they're gonna fall out of favor. Like, this is what we have in our country: is somebody gets elected president, their party gets killed in the midterms, and I wouldn't say that they're really like falling out of love with the Democratic policy. Joe Biden won an election based on not being Trump. Like, that was his whole campaign. There wasn't really a lot of policy to that. But again, he's like Obama, who was a way more successful campaigner, won by huge margins. He lost the midterms because people are in a mood right now in this country where they just want to throw the bums out every 2 to 4 years.
But even more so with this administration, because it's like Trump had COVID. That was his big thing. That was the crisis that he had the least amount of control over. Biden has everything from gigantic inflation, massive inflation, to what is basically a proxy war
It's a
in
crisis
Europe.
after crisis. You have the Afghanistan crisis, you have the Ukraine
Gas
crisis,
prices, oil
crisis,
prices,
economic crisis, crime crisis,
supply
in a
chain
year,
issues.
Look at how we've had all these crises over and over again. Like it is because it's failed feckless leadership.
And it's not just
in Afghanistan, because I'm surprised, because you just said like 5 minutes ago that you thought that it would be like fine. If,
I still think, I absolutely think we should have pulled out. So if you want to know my take on Afghanistan, if
Okay.
you're going to go there, this is what we should have done. We should have absolutely pulled people out, but we should have waited till the winter, number one, which they were advised to do, but he wanted to do it before that September deadline. But if they waited until the winter and pulled it out when it's hard in the mountainous hills of Afghanistan
that
to
would
do
have
that.
bought, what, like a week? I mean,
No,
come on.
no. As a matter of
but,
fact,
you
it
know,
wouldn't have. That's
but
not
there were
true.
years.
But there were also
20 years of arming and funding and pouring money into this government.
there
in
were
Afghanistan
also
couldn't get you a government that
conditions.
could last for 2 minutes.
No.
without
There
the
were
United
also
States.
conditions to the
We could
pullout
have
which
stayed
were not
for another
met.
10 years, never
No,
mind
not
till the
10 years.
winter.
Not
The
10
same
years.
thing
You
would
just
have
waited
happened.
2 months. You could have pulled everybody out of there slowly. And every foreign policy person, like Todd Bensman and all the people that study this all the time, it's like even if you just waited a month and a half to do that, it would have been seamless. If you would have transitioned people out of there slowly, there was a plan to do it, but he wanted to get it done before that September 11th deadline.
Yeah, he wanted a
Everyone
photo
knows
op.
that.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. There was a way to do it. Do I think that we should have been there? No. Do I think we should have pulled our people out? Yes. The way that he did it was a complete failure, and everyone knows it.
And here's
The only way
I'm
to have
gonna
a
say
smooth pullout from Afghanistan would be to actually make it a negotiate, to actually like negotiate with the Taliban about how to do it, because they were gonna come to power the second.
I think that negotiating with the Taliban is a bad idea. I never thought that Trump was
started
good
to pull
on that,
out.
so
They
don't
have
put me in that box.
this idea. There's a reason that Trump was. He laid the diplomatic framework, but there's a reason that Trump wasn't willing to yank the Band-Aid off while he was president, because whenever it happened, it was gonna be.
But
a
We didn't have to
long
leave
list.
our people hanging there waiting to get into, like, I was helping our translators come here. I was actually getting their passports and sending them to private planes to help our people get here. I'm telling you that the way that he did it was completely irresponsible from ground up. It was wrong. And we have a lot of people that did help us, translators and things like that, and they should be here. They should be protected, but they weren't. We have people that are still there, stuck there. It was wrong.
And the Taliban are terrible, obviously, but the negotiation, the terms, the conditions were that the Taliban was supposed to be in active negotiations with the Afghanistan government. Biden pulled out, and they were not in. They had dropped out of negotiations. So I have a feeling that Trump, he wouldn't have rushed it. He would have said, "We're pulling people out," and get into these negotiations, and it could have happened. And then we could have pulled out. And then if the Taliban had issues after we pulled out, that's their problem.
All you had to do is wait till the winter season where they can't fight back. Like, what?
And just, I have a feeling that if the Republicans win back the Senate and the House, there's going to be committees dedicated to the Afghanistan pullout, to whatever happens with the Durham report, which...
You say that. Listen, I'm a Republican. I'll tell you that probably won't happen either.
Wait, well,
I'm not even gonna lie.
when do you think that Durham is going to come out with a with his?
I think it's going to mean nothing. Like, all these investigations mean
Really?
nothing. Yeah. I mean, I work for Congress, and there are good members. There really are, like, some that you don't see on TV every day. But in all, like, everybody sucks. They're never gonna do
I
anything.
think I'm more hopeful. I think I'm more hopeful with what's actually the outcome of the Durham report. At the very least, we're definitely going to have better committees than the sleepy
the 9/11
Mueller
committee?
report.
I have a question.
Sorry,
So I've heard Trump mentioned a few times. He's kind of an elephant in the room in a sense. This is the first election season since he left office. What does it mean to be a Republican candidate today? What kinds of Republicans are going to be running in this upcoming election season, you think? Is it going to be the Trumpian types? I guess, like, what comes to mind? Association, protectionist, I don't know, whatever else you associate with Trump, versus more of the, like, old style, I don't know, how would you describe, like, more of a William Buckley type of Republican? Anyway, what does it mean to be a Republican?
It honestly depends on what your district is like, and people always get this confused. People will say, like, people that are, say, in more red states or red counties, and they'll say, oh, you know, these Republican congressmen, they don't do anything. They're not leaders. They're not far right enough. We should just get these rhinos out. But like, the rhinos are in purple districts where their constituents are rhinos, right? And so it depends on actually where you live and what it's going to look like. You're never going to get rid of the Romney types. You're never going to, because that's what his home state looks like. That's what his district looks like. I mean, it really depends on where you live. Now, the places that are right, say like Southeast Texas, is becoming more right, more red meat, more right wing. But and you'll see those go further to the right. But I think that more people are getting to be in that purple zone. So like Pennsylvania, you might see swing more right. Florida, we know, is going to stay right. I just don't think that there is like a Trump Republican. It depends county by county and district by district.
Yeah, Sean.
I was gonna Trump's. What a lot of people don't understand about politics is overall what most voters want, because they play team sports, is to win. Trump is the guy right now. So if you're running as a Republican, you're going to be more like Trump, because until there's another candidate that wins another presidency, like, he's the last guy that won, and he genuinely has broad support amongst the Republican Party. His impact is more superficial than changing policies. Like, Trump's policies tended to change more on who he had in staffing positions in his administration and what Jared Kushner wanted to do. But the way that he fights back, that's what the Republicans have kind of been duplicating and all that. So it's more like he's always been more of a symbolic candidate than somebody who's more policy oriented, which everybody always thought that was a bad thing. They're like, we need like this guy that like knows all the details and all that. But in reality, he just like let his staff do their things. So if you're like genuinely a Republican, then you would get pretty Republican policy from him, because his staffers were doing it. Because again, he's more of a salesman. He's more of a face. He's more there to be a lightning rod to take all the strikes and draw all the attention away. And by the way, the people who need Trump back the most aren't the Republicans. They're the Democrats. They're still trying to run campaigns against him. Youngkin's entire the campaign against Youngkin was Trump said nice things about him. He said nice things about Trump. But when he's not in the room, all of a sudden you got to find something else, because people are like, he's not that focal point that the left needs to rally back against them. So his impact is more symbolic. He's probably going to run again if we ever get to that question, because everybody who runs for president has a giant ego, and he'll probably win.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's probably right. I definitely want to like circle and underline one of the first things you said, which is that, you know, you asked a minute ago about, you know, Trump Republicans versus, what did you say, like William F.
Versus never Trumpers.
Yeah, and I would say that the difference between the two is largely about what's on the packaging, not what's inside the can. That you know, if you look, like a few years ago, Steve Bannon did this debate in Toronto, the Must debate with David Frum, and I thought it was amazing. There was like an hour or something debate, and they never actually got around to disagreeing about policy, because why would they? They're basically Republicans, right? They pretty much agree on that stuff. If you look at how Trump governed outside of certain, you know, I think very cruel gestures with regards to immigration and various attempts at the Muslim ban, outside of that,
it was not a Muslim ban.
And outside of some of the sort of erraticness about foreign policy, I think that Trump pretty much governed the way that Mitt Romney would have governed if he'd won in 2012. I think Trump pretty much governed the way that John McCain would have governed, you know, if he'd won in 2008. You know, basically that, you know, you have an administration that's pretty much staffed with regular Wall Street Republicans who want to deregulate, who want to bust unions, who, you know, want to lower taxes, all that stuff, and all the populist hot air just kind of whiffs away.
What everybody on this panel seems to be ignoring right now is that, like, regular people who are maybe interested in politics, maybe not, and even left wing or people that were like center left are now swinging more right wing because they see how disastrous Biden and the Democrats' policies have been on their wallets and on their kids. And you look at it like my boy James Klug on the street. You should see these people that are like, whoa, I didn't expect Biden to be like this. He's awful. I can't believe I voted for him. You see it all over Twitter, right? Like, the people are pissed. People are pissed that our inflation is what, 8% now, I think. I don't remember the latest numbers, but they're watching people flood over our border. We're watching California towns get taken over by cartels. We are watching the destruction of America right before our eyes because of Democrat policies in a year. Think about where we were a year and a half ago and where we are now and how much worse off we are, and you don't think the average American person sees that? You're crazy. There are way more people coming to the right, and it's not because of Donald Trump. It's not because of anything. It's because of bad Biden administration policies.
All Republicans, thank you. All Republicans need to do is be aggressively anti-war, as definitely with Ukraine, and just do
Not what they've been doing.
and just do just take every Democrat policy and say, I'm going to do the opposite.
See,
Like every
I'm gonna even disagree on the foreign policy stuff. People don't vote on foreign policy. The Afghanistan war is polling at 18% for a decade. Nobody lost their job over it.
But
what
with
Republicans need to do is say, look at the price of gas. Look at it. Look at the price of gas before. Just run your campaign simple, an issue that goes to the gut of the American people, and play tapes of Jen Psaki and all these people saying, oh, well, they could drill all they want. Like, don't worry about it. Like, it's
Get an
just
electric
this thing.
car. It's only
Like,
50 grand.
Just run your campaign like that.
margarita.
Play Pete Buttigieg saying, like, get an electric car. Don't worry about it, bro.
All right, same question I asked about Republican candidates, about Democrats. What does it mean to be a Democrat candidate in the upcoming election season? Is it going to be like, are they going to double down on the gays, like the identity,
You have Jen Psaki
social
crying
stuff?
about it for no reason.
Are they going to focus more on the economic stuff, you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, in a way, it's like what Lisa said, it's district by district. I think that it really depends. I think that, you could get, a few more people who actually have good economic policies to, win Democratic primaries and then, then win elections. But like, I'm not wildly optimistic about that, right? I think that, unfortunately, right, I think that the left was defeated in 2020, and it is going to take a while for that moment to come again in quite the way that it did. And so, unfortunately, yeah, I think that you are going to get a lot of Democrats who sort of lead into the culture war stuff on their side. This is the party that, again, they couldn't get it together even to pass a $15 minimum wage, but you could get them to like beclown themselves like wearing kente cloth, and kneeling and in 2000, in 2020. Unfortunately, that says everything.
That didn't work.
Neither did the $15 minimum wage in Washington State either. But
it's a fundamentally establishment pro-corporate party. There is a small opposition within it that actually does have widespread popular support for some of its policies, but it's probably going to take a long time for it to have much of a breakthrough.
Yeah, so if you see if you're a Democrat and you see your local Republican saying, the Democrats are teaching our kids too much too soon about sex at school, and also their economic policy is putting us all in poverty, how do you answer that as a Democrat? And you can all give, whether or not you're in the habit of giving Democrats advice, you can all sort of say, what do you think a Democrat candidate could say to counter that?
Well, if they're saying they're teaching too much sex at school, and then that's used as a reason to support stuff like the DeSantis bill in Florida, I would just simply point out that bill is irrelevant to that issue. That there's nothing in there that says that you can't, has anything to do with teaching about sex in school. It says stuff about teaching sexual orientation in school. So masturbation, pardon the pun,
So wait, my 8-year-old, I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old.
But again, reading a book with a gay character in it, quite possibly something people might worry that they shouldn't do because this incredibly broad, vague language is chilling, which is the entire point. But really, what they should do, unfortunately, I think most of them aren't gonna, right? But what they should do is say, why are you talking about this? You're talking about this because in terms of the issues that actually materially affect people's lives, you've got nothing. Here's what we should do instead. Unfortunately, most Democrats can't do that because they have absolutely nothing appealing to say.
So my 5-year-old and my 8-year-old should have teachers talking to them and saying, if you choose to be a girl, you can be a girl. If you choose to be a boy, you can be a boy. You sanction that at between kindergarten and 3rd grade. Is that what you're saying?
Wait a second. So you think 4th grade it's fine?
No, I don't think any of it's fine. Actually, I think the bill didn't go far enough. I think it should never be discussed
I'm
with
just-
teachers, as a matter of fact. I think that it was, I think that if it,
So
anything,
if,
that bill
so-
needed to go 100 million times
So,
further.
so if a student says in a class, a 4th grade class, a 12th grade class, apparently for you,
Kids don't talk
right?
about that. They don't even know what.
Oh, come on! If a student says, "Oh, I heard such and such was gay," what does gay mean? You should just say, "Sorry, I'm not allowed to answer."
No, you say, talk to your parents. Talk to your parents. It's that easy. There is no reason at all for, I saw that one guy on like TikTok or whatever it was, and he was like, oh, I can't tell my kids. First of all, it's not your kids,
About
it's
my
your
gay
students,
cruise or
right?
whatever.
Like about going paddleboarding with my partner, right? Why just say, you don't need to say you went paddleboarding with your partner. All you gotta say is I went paddleboarding this weekend. And by the way,
Oh,
anybody
just-
in this
or
room,
don't
did your
say
teachers,
that to say,
wait a
that
minute,
is
did your
amazing.
teachers,
That's an amazing
first
thing
of
to
all,
say.
Did your teachers, when you guys were growing up, anybody in this room, did they tell you what they did on the weekends?
Yes!
No,
Yes!
they didn't.
Anybody who
absolutely
says
did
otherwise,
not.
frankly, either doesn't
Your
when I
teachers are
was
not
in
your
school,
friends.
When I was
They're
in
your
kindergarten-
teachers.
lying.
When I was in kindergarten or 3rd grade, I didn't know F all about my teachers.
Okay.
I didn't know
I think
anything
if
about
you think
I
that
knew
that's a
their
universal
name
experience,
and whether they were a
if you
man
even
or
think
a
that's
woman.
a universal
It is
experience of people above a
inappropriate.
certain age threshold.
They are not
I think
there-
that's very silly.
If the
I
Dem-
suspect
if the
that
Democrats
you know
were-
it's not a
if the
universal
Democrats were
experience,
smart, and they are not.
that you are pretending for the sake of demagoguery that it is
Look,
a universal
Teachers are not there to be
experience.
your friends. They're there to teach you reading, writing, and
And they're
arithmetic.
not even
They are
doing
not
that.
there for anything else, right? And they're not even doing that.
They're not even doing
U.S. Rankings for education are falling behind the rest of the world. And you know why? It's because they want to tell you what they did on the weekend with their partner.
Oh yeah,
It's
really?
disgusting.
You think that has a big impact on U.S. rankings?
Well,
in
what do you
education?
think is going on? Because they seriously seem to be more concerned about that than anything else. I mean, that's what all the outrage is, no?
Okay, I do not think that whether some teacher says, as would be very common for any teacher, gay, straight, whatever,
It shouldn't
that
be.
like I went paddleboarding, with my wife, husband, whatever, over the weekend.
What's a paddleboarding?
I think that they have a
Like what
I think
3rd
that- I
grader
think
knows
that
what
they-
paddleboarding is?
Yes,
Well,
no,
why
you're
should
right.
they
You're
care?
right. That would just be completely beyond them. There's no way they could possibly grasp the
You
concept
shouldn't be
of
telling our kids what they're
paddleboarding.
doing
I
on
know,
the
I
weekend.
know, I
anyway.
need to
But
teach,
the
I
idea
need to
that
teach you
this
the
has
alphabet, but
anything
I'm going to teach you about
do
paddleboarding
on a
today.
statistical level with educational outcomes like the rankings of the United States as opposed to other countries, I've got to say, it's kind of absurd on its face. I doubt you believe that.
Hold on. Are you guys telling me that teachers don't sit into the classroom over the weekend until the students come back Monday morning?
What?
Because that's what I believed
See,
until
I
the start of
thought-
this conversation.
I've actually known little kids to think that that teachers lived at the school,
That's
right?
what I- that's what-
and that's
They don't?
But it's true. Maybe it's true.
I need to
housing's very
jump in
expensive
here
right now.
because, first of all, I'm not proud of this, but I'm from a generation where we used to call our teachers gay, and
Woo!
and that was wrong,
1990s.
and that was not cool.
80s.
Also, it's time for the Q&A. Line up at the microphone and let's find out what are really the triggering topics.
If these
Why do I feel like people are
I just want to say
really
if the
rushing
Democrats
to
were
line up right
smart,
now?
they would just say this don't say gay. That's crazy. That's dumb. Why are we even calling that? We shouldn't even. It's fine. The bill's fine, and then drop it and let it go. But instead, they're fighting it tooth and nail for no reason. It's just making
bill
it look
didn't go far
crazy.
enough.
Yes, cowboy.
I agree.
This is for Sean and Andrew, well, mostly Sean, since he's a libertarian. Do you think or do not think that Ron DeSantis is going too far in stopping critical race theory or limiting stopping like mass mandates by violating private property rights?
Explain how. The private property. right?
Removing the self-government of Disney, forcing private companies to not mandate vaccine passports.
I got you. So a lot of what we saw early on after the vaccine got launched was mandates for vaccines in order to maintain your job, and we saw a lot of that from the government level. But there was also a lot of businesses that did that. So DeSantis decided to, instead of just not having that from the government level, to counteract that by mandating that employers and all these locations can't mandate that. And he's saying that's an issue of private property rights. I would say that it actually is. If you own a business establishment, then you should actually have to be able to make those rulings. Now, we have a bunch of conflicting laws and all this stuff about like how you can't deny entry to people based on all these other reasons. So I can understand how it gets legal. Like DeSantis could have a legal justification, but if you're going with a pure private property rights argument, if I say you can't come into my establishment for any reason whatsoever because you're missing something, because you have something, whatever, then that is a violation. As for the Disney Special Administrative Zone, it's a weird thing because they probably should have taken that away after they never built that city in like 1960 when they were supposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but as for doing it due to opposition to a bill, I feel dubious about that because you end up in a situation where you're using government power to punish organizations and people for their speech.
No, but it's not speech. It's not even an opinion. Disney was saying that they were going to do what they could to fight this bill. If you say I don't like it, that's fine. But once you say we're going to use our power to get rid of this bill because we think it's harmful, blah blah blah, then they're getting into the political sphere.
But he asked me in terms of purely private property rights.
Right, but
like I understand the concept.
But you said speech, and it goes.
I'm
goes
actually
well
with
beyond
you
that.
on this, as far right and crazy as I am, right? Like, I think that if a business wants to say you can't come in here unless you're vaccinated, that's on them, and then people like me won't go and patronize that business. I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I think that was a little overreach, but I do think that, you can't like to have the CDC or something like that make all these sweeping things when nobody voted them in. It is more problematic than businesses saying if you don't want to have a vaccine, you can't come.
And I've been living in Florida for like the last half year, and there have been businesses that said we require a mask to come in, like GameStop. I was like, not going to GameStop.
Never should have went.
Yes.
Okay, so as many of you know, the Biden administration, specifically Biden himself, is losing a lot of young people and millennials, specifically because he broke the promise about college debt. Do you think it's wise to conservatives to jump on that issue, not give out payment backs, because that's not right, but actually have a concrete solution like stopping the predatory loan system that's happening on these kids and actually providing incentives to join trade schools and actually providing incentives to work in high school to pay off that college debt? Do you think it's wise to actually give these young people something to snatch away a key demographic that Democrats have that they actually lost?
It's not predatory. Nobody's holding a gun up to somebody's head and say, if you want to go to school.
Kind of.
No, look.
Disagree.
The federal government should not be giving out loans for school.
Correct. That's where I was going to go. We should not be
Full stop.
federally backing
Okay.
loans. And if you go through the history of federally backing loans, you can see how much college tuition has increased exponentially, somewhere to like 700%. Because
Yeah.
as soon as they started doing that, they knew that those loans were guaranteed, and they can jack tuition prices up.
This is
That is 100%
a panel on its own,
Yes.
right? But the federal government, at the very least, I would say, fine, you want this money, what are you going to study? What's your rate of return?
It doesn't
right?
matter. Even if you choose, you take out a loan, you decide, I'm going to take a loan, and you choose to study some horrible thing where you're not going to get a job or not even do well, you barely graduate, and then you go off to get a job. Somebody put that money out for you. You still owe that debt. Like, where is the personal responsibility? Why are we going to say, just because you can't find a job because you got all D's or C's, whatever it took to pass, we're just going to relieve you of that? No, there has to be some accountability, and that's where our whole system is corrupt anyway. There's no accountability for anybody anymore.
Professor?
Yeah, I think that the evidence from country to country comparisons, including some, by the way, that kick our ass in those education surveys, apparently because, I don't know, maybe teachers in the Nordic countries never admit to paddle boating. That must be why. But in many of those countries, I think it works quite well. The student loan issue doesn't come up because nobody's
it's a homogeneous
charged
society.
Tuition to go to college, because this is something that is a basic human good that you should be able to get just for that person, just like K-12, just like it would be unreasonable to charge tuition for somebody to go to high school. It's unreasonable to charge tuition for people to go to college, especially if you're somebody who goes around saying, fast food workers shouldn't complain they can't support themselves on this income. They should go to college if they want more money. Well,
says that?
You should have. Yeah.
Did
who does
anybody
say
on
that?
this panel say that?
Who says that, Mike?
he made a video to respond to one of my videos, and the whole time he was just straw manning and put words into my mouth. I've actually worked in fast
we watched the entirety of the video,
No,
so
he
I guess
put words into my mouth
perhaps
the whole
he was
time, and Sean will
strawmanning
tell you too.
Perhaps he was strawmanning himself, but I think if you're going to say that,
Okay,
then
no, you're
you
just a liar.
really need.
You're just a liar.
You really okay?
No.
We watched every minute of it. There's
if
no
a girl works in
the man's
fast
fucking
food
lying right now.
and is a crew
as
member
to
for
as to the
8 years-
question,
No.
you shouldn't be if you're going to say.
I'm not against people working
if
in
you're-
fast
if
food.
you're
I worked at
gonna say-
McDonald's for a day and quit
Okay.
because it was
If
hot
you're-
and
if you're
stinky and
gonna
the pants were
say,
too short.
oh,
for
they
me.
should
Okay.
go back to college if they want more money. I think
No,
that
that's
you
not
should,
what I
you should
said.
treat.
I got you.
Well, it is actually a thing you said. I'm glad to hear that you've reconsidered it. But if you're going to say that, you should not be shaking people down for large amounts of money or any amounts of money to go to college. You should pay for it through progressive taxation, the way that countries like Finland that has the best education system in the entire planet do, and that would be better all around, and that way this would be a non-issue.
To be clear, Andrew.
These are absolutely rights. People who think the only real rights are negative rights
That's me.
do not have a good argument.
That's me. Here for negative rights, guys.
To be clear, Andrew was playing the clip of the girl saying not everybody could go to college. He didn't tell her to go to school. That's ridiculous.
Well, what he
Thank
did
you,
say, so I think that he
You
didn't
need to answer the next
offers
question,
tuition
but you're just
He did. Okay, so did you not say that she wanted time off? She should have become a manager.
What I was saying was
It's a
that
different
if you
question,
want,
Okay, but I mean, like, if he's going to play dumb about
Guys, this is
what
getting
he was
boring, and
trying
we've got
to
a really
suggest
big
there
line here.
in that video, I think that you have to bring some of this other stuff in, because I think if you want to look at in context, is he just making this non sequitur factual point that she, that she would have had this way of going to college, or is he suggesting that, in fact, he says at one point in the video, if she'd just gone to college instead of getting knocked up, then she wouldn't be having this
no,
problem.
what I said was that she got knocked up.
So
and
we
that's
can't talk
why
about
she didn't
abstinence
go
in
to
schools
college.
anymore.
That's
Okay.
well, okay. You should
All right,
focus on that.
I'm
instead of
sorry.
this other thing
Sounds
about
like
sexual
to be
orientation.
continued on YouTube, I hope.
All right, go. Sorry
and
about that.
Odyssey, by the way.
All right, this is going to be a question for Sean specifically. Everybody's discussing
Wow.
inconsequential topics like economics and education. Don't you think the real front runner, the person that talks about quality YouTube content like saving the real, is going to be the actual issue on voters' minds?
Yes. Listen, this man is 100% right. There is a show on Warner Brothers. It's being canceled June 3rd. It's the 4th knockoff of The View. It's called The Real. Everybody use hashtag Save the Real.
Yes. Agreed, because I like that spicy content.
Hi, this is for Sean, but it kind of is a little more relevant to this discussion on midterms and whatnot. I'm a young guy. I'm kind of looking towards the future and wanting to move places. But there's, and I've heard some of you guys speak about this before, there's this ongoing phenomenon where there's all these refugee Californians kind of crossing state lines and moving to other states and, en masse. I'm kind of concerned looking towards the future, and maybe this doesn't affect this midterm, maybe, but there's a lot of people moving, say here in Texas, and how do I, as a young guy, or older people, or millennials looking to move places, trying to find money anywhere to get a house, how do you know that where you're moving, the last bastions of freedom and security, how do you know these places aren't just going to turn to shit?
It's like we're invading them.
Can I say a quick thing? I think the people leaving California are probably more likely to vote Republican.
You say that, and then they get here, and they're like doing town halls
I'm
with
not
us,
saying
and
I'm
they're
not saying
how we need to
everybody,
take away guns.
but they left for a reason. They left for certain reasons, and theoretically they would vote against us.
There's people who have moved from California over the years to places like Austin, Texas for the weather. They're typically very Democratic. But if you look at the breakdown of Robert Francis O'Rourke versus Ted Cruz's Senate race, what you would find out is had only native-born Texans voted in that election, Robert would have won and beat Ted Cruz in the Senate race. So yes, he is right. The red people are moving to the red states and they're voting with their feet.
So I was talking more about COVID. You know, like people
even
leaving because of COVID, not for the weather necessarily.
Right. I'm just
Not
saying there's
strictly for
certain,
the
there's
weather.
certain instances of Democrats moving to Austin, and then they're like, it's similar weather or whatever. It's fine.
it's not.
But
It
most of the
sucks out here.
time,
Yeah, but we have the same
most-
thing. We have the same thing down on the Gulf Coast, and like we'll hold town halls, and they'll say, "Well, I'm from California. I moved here 3 years ago, and you know, we don't want these. We don't want like these gun laws. We want gun restrictions or whatever." And they'll stand up and say that, and we're like, "Well, then go back to California. Go. See ya."
Look, there's always isolated instances, but the overall trend is what it is. O'Rourke would be the senator from Texas if not for people moving from other states.
Interesting.
So Ron DeSantis has proven that Republicans can push legislation, push towards something with great success. What other issues, other than the gender ideology that he's outlawing, what other legislation could Republicans push towards, and what other legislation could libertarians or Democrats push towards that wouldn't alienate people on the opposite sides?
Well, you can't say energy, but that was where I was going to go before that. But energy, manufacturing, everything that's going to bring back jobs here. People forget that, like, you can go back to just the Civil War, right? Where who won the war? The people that had the means of production. Where's all the means of production now? It's not here. It's China, right? And so we're going to be vulnerable unless we bring back our energy independence, our manufacturing. If we get rid of all these things that undermine what it means to make America successful. So, I mean, I think that's where we should start.
Anyone else, or should we go? All right, go ahead.
Hey, you guys. So my question is, in 2017, there were 6 million users on Coinbase, out of which only 1,000 reported cryptocurrencies on their tax returns, at which point the IRS sued Coinbase and got a list of 13,000 names. And then in 2019, they sent out soft letters, the IRS did, to basically tell people, you better, start acting right. And not a lot of people did. And so over the years, there's been this crescendo to the IRS implementing just like a massive wave of audits for crypto owners. And so my question is, it probably won't be on this election cycle, but very soon I feel like there's going to be a lot of like scared, pissed off crypto owners that have a massive pool of wealth that could influence politics. How do you see that playing out?
All I can say is hopefully. I mean, they've been weaponizing the IRS forever now, so hopefully that does happen. Hopefully people get pissed off and we say get rid of it, do a flat tax.
I mean, I think people hate the IRS, and for good reason. The IRS collects more information on you than any of our intelligence agencies, and you just turn it over willingly. As for the Coinbase thing in particular, I mean, what was the number you gave? 13,000 names?
They sued them for all the names they got, 13,000.
Yeah, that may not be enough to like win an election. And honestly, I don't know anything about like crypto or what it's going to be worth or anything like that. I try not to like put money in things I don't understand. But yeah, people hate stories about the IRS. I think that $600 side hustle reporting restriction is going to piss a lot of people off. But do they even know that came in the Build Back Better plan or after that? I forgot when they added that. Like, so I don't know if that issue, it pisses people off because it's the IRS. But I don't know if you could tie that. Like, you can't staple that on Joe Biden's forehead. People feel like they could staple gas prices on his forehead. So I'm not sure what the impact would be.
Yeah, I mean, if the idea is that people just weren't reporting this income at all, I don't know what the flat tax is going to do about that. I mean, they're not going to pay that either. I do think that many people are very irritated, and rightly so, by the IRS. I think it's a ridiculous thing that you have this like stressful process where you have to, by a certain deadline, report back to the government information that you're just copying from government forms, even if you have a very simple tax return, even if you just got a W-2. But I think that there too, I think that Nordic social democracies, a lot of them do it much better. In Sweden, many taxpayers literally just get a text message from their revenue service saying, this is how much we've calculated
It's like comparing
you
apples to
owe,
oranges.
and you can say yes, and that's it. That's doing your return. H&R Block and Intuit, which is the company that owned TurboTax, have lobbied against efforts to implement a system like this in here. And many conservatives don't like that idea of implementing that, many people like Grover Norquist don't like that idea because they want taxes to be painful to, remind people to hate it. But, I think that's the way we should go.
I agree with making it painful. I pay all my taxes in one chunk in April just so I could feel the pain in my heart when I do it. It works. It makes you hate it.
Good job.
So I have a question for each of the panelists. So I heard that Better Discourse was supposed to be
Get closer to the microphone.
Sorry. So I heard Better Discourse was supposed to be a conference where left and right kind of came together and celebrated being friends. So I have a question for each of you. I'd love to hear one opinion you hold that you think someone on the other side of the aisle would agree with.
I didn't hear that last part.
I would love to hear one opinion each of you hold that you think someone on the other side of the aisle from you would agree with.
We just agree we hate the IRS. So we all collectively hate the IRS. And
Any others? Any other examples?
We'd probably agree on legalizing marijuana. You might be in the decriminalization camp, but
No, I'm for legalizing it. I think you should be able to go into. I think you should be able to go into a store, and just buy it. Right? Hell, I'd be in favor of having state weed stores like the state liquor store in New Hampshire.
You ruined it. Now we got to break up.
Hey, people from other states drive into New Hampshire to buy liquor there because they have huge stores, a great selection, and it's cheap because they exempt it from sales tax. So, I don't know. I think you should learn to love state liquor stores.
All right. No other examples?
Oh, well, I think there was one earlier. I think that it's not everybody here, but, I think some of the people over there, did seem to be in favor of backing off anything that would start World War III.
Yeah.
And I hope that that's something that lots of people.
Yeah, I think we're all anti-war up here.
Yeah, I think we're all
I think they should put that on the poster. Better Discourse 4. We're against thermonuclear warfare.
Well,
Anti-war,
unfortunately, right
anti-IRS.
now, if you look at the polls, that is a very controversial position.
Yeah. So legalize weed and don't go to nuclear war sounds like what brings
And
us
get
all
rid of
here.
the IRS.
Well,
Although, think about how good the weed would be with all that radiation involved.
That's something to consider.
Okay, I can go. So I was just wondering, as far as it appears to me that a lot of these media corporations tend to be more left-leaning, and I was just wondering if there's anything that maybe like the more free speech right-wing people can start to do in order to try to start their own cultural narratives in order to try to facilitate more free speech and that kind of a thing.
well, that's what we're trying to do with Twitter, right? Twitter's supposed to be this bastion of free speech, and instead conservatives and Republicans are just constantly shadow banned, constantly suspended for talking about.
It's already happening. Look at all the Daily Wire's doing right now. They're coming out with children's content and
Right, but so
razors and
much of
whatever.
it is like subscription stuff. But as far as getting fighting the left mainstream news narrative is to just basically go after it and say it's wrong.
The problem is, though, is that the right is always are reactive. So the left puts out this narrative, and all we do is make videos about how they're wrong, and we're never it's always like, oh, they said this, and this is why it's wrong, and we're not leading anything, and we can't because they're so big. So we're constantly on the defensive. It's constantly you're making YouTube videos, all of you up here, or not you, but you're making YouTube videos on how the left and the media has been wrong and has been reporting things wrong. We're never offensive.
What would conservatives advocate for if they weren't busy fighting the left?
I don't know. I haven't been in that position for a very long time. I think that if we just champion our values and get people to understand that there has to be some order and there has to be some responsibility in your life and go for what the policies that actually make our country better, which we've seen in the last 4 years, and now we're seeing the destruction of it. So if we just highlight the destruction that we've been seeing for the last year, then we should be all right.
I would say, we've heard the things about building your own social media and all that. It turns out a bunch of people tried that. They ended up getting shut down. So I think, the only solution, and I think all of us can do this, is you have to start a really good payment processing company then use that money to start an electric car company, and then you can buy a social media company and hopefully maybe institute some form of free speech.
I'm hoping he gets it done.
And also go to Mars.
But now the government's coming after him. Not that they don't have a little reason with his China and his low orbit space and what the information he's given to China. But other than that, like, they're coming after him now. Now all of a sudden he's under investigation again.
He's a supervillain.
It's also important for a lot of conservatives to make sure that they can exist on the public forum and not retreat to these alternative spaces. I see a lot of people who get banned on like a principle or on a stand that's not worth anything, and it's like you can't do anything if you don't keep yourself in the arena. So like Andrew makes really good content, in my opinion, not in Ben's opinion, but in my opinion. But Andrew's very workable. It's going to take a lot for him to get banned.
But look at what Savannah, who's just up here, got banned.
I'm not edgy.
We got one question in 1 minute. What you got?
Yeah, it's cool. This was more of a personal question from my political curiosity, but Ben, you consider yourself a socialist, correct?
Yes.
If we were to implement socialism here in America, how would we avoid the slide towards tyranny where it ends up becoming the same old wolf in different sheep's clothing the way we've seen in the 20th century up till now?
Yeah, well, I'd say that you have exactly 0 examples of democratic socialism becoming tyranny. I think that you have exactly one ambiguous example of something
Never
like
been
that,
done right.
which would be the Russian Revolution. So if you believe that the Bolsheviks, originally, were super democratic, which a lot of other people on the left would really disagree with, then that would be the exact one. But certainly the sort of road to socialism that I would advocate, democratic road to socialism, where you start with social democracy, a la the Nordic states, Finland, Norway, Sweden, etc., and then go beyond that. I think that's actually a great expansion of democracy. I think that we were just talking about free speech. Well, what's the issue with free speech? Well, one, you have all private corporations that could do whatever they want. They have no constitutional limitations. They get to decide what content is allowed and what isn't, instead of treating social media like the public square that it is and treating it as a public utility. And two, if people are worried that they tweet the wrong thing and they're going to get fired, you know what a solution to that is? Unions. That they have not letting people just get fired without due process because they're at an at-will workplace like most Americans work at. So I think that the things that the left, the democratic socialist left, want actually considerably increase freedom. And yes, long-term, the Beyond Sweden horizon is extending democracy into the workplace. And no, I don't think having more democracy is somehow going to turn into tyranny. I think that it's going to effectively curb corporate tyranny.
So nobody in a union has been fired over their social media accounts. Is that what they're saying? That the unions completely protected these people?
Okay.
This could be another
that is an interesting example of listening. What I said is that if you have a union, you can't just be fired with no due process. They have that's what a union does. One of the things that a union does, the terms of the union contract is a process. It's like
never get fired.
It's like the claim is not nobody's ever been fired. The claim
what you were
is
saying
that it makes
was
it
that
harder
social
to fire people. You need due process. It's like being a main guy in the
that's what they do
mafia.
for
They
the
can
post
still
office.
whack you, but they need to sit down in a good reason.
You want to know real quick, you don't want to know why your delivery sucks for the post office? It's because you get bad people in there that they can't fire. You know what they do? They say, you're not delivering mail, and you're not doing your route, and you're not doing anything. So they fire you. And so the union comes in, and they have to hold that position open for 90 days. They're not allowed to hire somebody else. After all the arbitration process happens, where you still have no carrier for 90 days, then they say, you know what? You shouldn't have been fired anyway. They come back, they continue to be a shitty employee, and the cycle starts over. It happens like that in the VA. It happens like that everywhere. You cannot get rid of.
Yeah, you don't actually have a higher rate of mail delivery problems in USPS than you do with FedEx statistically. And I would not, if I were you, I'm not normally in the business of giving tactical and strategic advice to Republicans, but I'll make an exception and say that if I were you, I would not emphasize this, because by far the most popular government institution in every single poll is the post office. People love the post office.
Well, let me tell you something. That's not necessarily true. I've had to, in now 2 different districts in 2 different states, Pennsylvania and Texas, hold town halls from USPS because of their delivery problems. So let's not say that, because that's absolutely not true.
No, it actually is.
And on that note,
People love the
Garden of
Anecdotes and data are not the same.
I will say nobody took the bait on Ben saying that wasn't real socialism, basically.
I did say that.
No,
I
she did.
I did.
Well, if that's what I had said, then maybe you could take the bait on it. What I said is that there are no examples of democratic socialism becoming tyranny.
Oh.
Exactly like I said, it's never been done right. It's never
Well,
been
no,
done right.
they're
That's exactly what I
democratic
said.
until they're not democratic. Like that was the
for
Venezuelan
example,
strategy.
Okay,
Hey, and on
blaming
this,
Venezuela on socialism
We're
is
getting
historically
the
and
nod that we
economically
gotta go.
illiterate. Venezuela
Goodbye,
has a smaller
everybody.
public sector than France. I
And on
know
that,
this is a
everyone
zombie
shut the
lie on
fuck
the
up.
right,
The panel's
but it
over.
is a
Everybody,
lie.
thank you. One more panel. Give it up for all of our panelists here today. Fuck the post office and good night. But one more panel.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.